Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Erin Zach, the Director for Alumni Engagement, and I would like to welcome you to Connecting with Canisius, our Lunch and Learn webinar series. The title of today's webinar is Game Plan, a discussion with Canisius Director of Athletics, Bill Maher. Joining us today are alumni, faculty, staff, and parents. I welcome all of you to our program. I would now like to introduce our host and moderator, former Golden Griffin baseball player, Andrew Russo. A two-time graduate of the college, Andrew is a member of the Alumni Association Board of Directors, as well as an adjunct professor within the Sports Product Development Master's Program. Andrew, I'll now turn the program over to you.
Erin, thank you so much, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It is my pleasure to welcome Bill Maher. Bill, thank you so much for your time, and certainly looking forward to an informative discussion today. I've gotten to know Bill over the last number of years since entering Canisius in 2007 as a freshman. So Bill and I have grown pretty close. We've grown to be friends, and look forward to, again, a great session here today. A little bit about Bill. Bill is in, hard to believe, his 17th year leading the Canisius athletics program. Returned to us after spending a number of years at the University of Buffalo in various capacities, including as their interim athletics director in 2003 to 2005. So since Bill took over, 20 varsity athletic teams here have amassed 45 conference and regional championships. 17 Griffins teams have gone into play in the NCAA tournament during Bill's tenure here with the college. Most notably, success in the classroom is important. 39 NCAA public recognition awards, while the college recently reported a record 97% success rate in the NCAA's most recent graduation success rate report. So tremendous accolades there, both on the field and in the classroom. So Bill, again, thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, please take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody. It's always a little bit humbling when former student athletes are now your moderators on these events, and they've been out of school for almost 13 years. So appreciate you helping us out with this, Andrew, and what you do for our program. And welcome to everybody. Appreciate you spending the time with us here for your lunch. If you have one of these sessions when you're in person, you're telling everybody, please continue to enjoy your lunch, so we don't have to worry about that. You guys can eat without any hesitation. So looking forward to it. So looking at the list, I think it's really interesting to see there's who's on the list and pre-registered. A lot of our athletic alumni, appreciate you joining us. Several members of our Hall of Fame are in the group. Parents of our current student athletes are in the group, teammates of mine, many of our Blue and Gold Fund members, and other folks that have an association with the college. So really appreciate you being here today. What we wanted to do is I have had a couple of opportunities to share some of this information with our constituent groups on campus. Our board of trustees, some of our groups of our board of trustees, our advancement team on campus, and some other groups. And Erin had asked me to come here today and share a little bit of that information, some of it from our collegiate consulting review that many of you have heard that we've gone through, which is an operational analysis of our program and how we may look to improve it. But to go a little bit beyond that, to share a little bit about our program and talk a little bit about some of the current events that are happening within the NCAA, because I know those are of interest to many of our fans and how it may impact Canisius. So I'm going to run through some information here for you. Appreciate those and thank those that have given us their pre-submitted questions, and Andrew will try and consolidate those into some of the groups and hopefully be able to get through all those and get this so that it's informative for folks, that it gives everybody a good sense of what's going on here on Main Street and how our student athletes are doing in their opportunities to represent Canisius and become certainly productive alumni. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as I work through some of this. So if just bear with me for a second, hopefully the technology will work as it's supposed to. So what we want to do is just talk a little bit about who we are and what our program is, how our student athletes impact our community. As I said, the collegiate consulting report, that we're going to talk through, the next steps for that, and then a little bit on the intercollegiate athletics and the national landscape. Some of the questions that were submitted had some of that in were of interest to folks. So, who we are first. 20 teams, many of you know. 2 different conferences. The Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference is our full all sports conference, and Atlantic Hockey is our hockey conference. Where they are geographically, there's some folks who are certainly maybe aware of this, but the MAC, certainly a New York Metro Tri-State area centered conference. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut is where the institutions are. For those former athletes that are on the call, we are, the league considers us the Western outpost, if you will. So it's a long trip for everybody to come out here once a year. Our teams are traveling frequently down to the central New York and down into the metro area as well. On Atlantic Hockey, 10-member institutions. Again, many of the institutions focused in Massachusetts and Connecticut. A little bit more representation on the western part of the state with RIT in Rochester and Mercyhurst in Erie. But again, those are the kind of the geographic locations. And as you think about conferences and you think about what's happening nationally, the geographic footprint is really important. And I think for both of our conferences, our geographic footprint is a real asset to allow us to continue to compete in very much a regional nature as we go through our athletic programs and see what's happening nationally. By the numbers, just an understanding of where our student athletes are. 403 student athletes on our rosters as of the fall of 21. That's 23% of the undergraduate population. That's a number, that percentage has been growing. Our student athlete population has been growing over my time here. And that's something that we're proud of, and they're a large impact on our campus community. In our freshman class, or this incoming class, I should say, 98 freshmen and 11 transfers, about 21% of the incoming freshman class. A lot of people wonder how much financial aid do we have? We'll talk a little bit about that, but 259 of our athletes receive some level of financial aid. Some people believe they're all on full scholarship. Those parents that are on the call would say that that's not true. And certainly there are some partial grants that are out there. There are a few full grant aids that in basketball is where our full grant aid scholarships are, but 144 of our kids, almost 36% of them are kids that are recruited here. They're absolutely recruited, but they're on merit or need only. And they're certainly critically important elements of our program and key contributors to our program. So a little bit about the roster history and the growth of our program. As you look at it, when you go over the last few years, the program has grown from about, when I started here, in the low 300s to now we are generally around 400 student athletes the last 4 years. That's a combination of a few different things. It certainly was a planned growth of our rosters by adding a couple sports a number of years ago, but also asking our coaches to continue to grow those rosters where possible. And we feel as though that's certainly an important part of our community, an important part of our success as we work to manage and provide that experience for those students. Our academic success, Andrew talked a little bit about it, but all students on campus, and there's a lot of data points that we look at, but grade point average seems to be one that many people are interested in, and our grade point average, all students on campus, the cumulative grade point average is 3.26. Our athletes are a 3.43. So we're very proud of the fact that they do perform well in the classroom in comparison to their other peers. Many people think that they may be a drain. In fact, one of the things I enjoy most about working around campus and going around campus is our faculty frequently remark to me about that our athletes are some of their best students in their classes. So we're certainly very proud of that. Women's track and cross country had our highest grade point average, 3.61 the past year. One data point that is very surprising to many people, our hockey team is almost always frequently at the top, and they get nosed out by them. Our hockey team's grade point average of 3.60 this year, so just barely, just a smidge behind our cross country group. So those kids can compete well on the ice, of course, and certainly in the classroom. We're very proud of that. So 19 of our 20 programs had 3.0 grade point average in the spring of 21. I like to joke with people that there may be a little grade inflation from when we were students or when I was a student to now. At least I try and get away with that. I don't know if others believe that, but nevertheless, the performance of our kids in the classroom is really spectacular. We're very proud of it. We also talk about what is our success rate in students that are leaving the college with their degrees. The federal graduation rate for Canisius is 68%. Our student athletes are, again, about 11 points above that at 79%. The NCAA's graduation success rate is the factor that looks at those students. If a student transfers from an institution and goes to another institution and ultimately graduates there, they're not considered someone who didn't graduate. They're considered a positive on our graduation rates. That's why they look back 6 years. The federal rate, if someone leaves the college, they are not considered to have graduated from here. So that's the difference between the two. But that 97% rate is really something that we're, again, very proud of. It's 9% higher than the national average in the NCAA. And it's something that our student athletes have consistently been very, very strong at, our ability to not only do well in the classroom and on the field, but certainly when they leave here, they're successful graduates of our program and moving on to great careers. The athletic achievement of the team, certainly that's one of the things that we do. And over my time here, we've had a lot of success and a lot of highlights for our programs. But when we look just at last year, which was really a very challenging year, a number of questions came in about how we managed COVID and what's come along with that. But really going through a very challenging year last year, 3 of our teams advanced to their respective conference championship games. Ice hockey, women's volleyball, and softball all had really terrific years last year and just missed out on the opportunity to advance to the NCAA championship, losing in those championship games. 10 of our student athletes were named first team all conference, and 9 student athletes received individual player of the year awards. So player of the year, rookie of the year type awards. So again, just a tremendous accomplishment for our athletes to go through this the past year. We've all lived through it. And this year, thankfully, for our athletes is far more of a quote normal experience. But last year was really a challenge for us. So what they were able to achieve and our coaching staff was able to achieve from an athletic standpoint was terrific. And I know the athletes were very appreciative of both the academic and the athletic experience that they were able to have last year as our campus kind of came together to figure our way through that. So that's a little bit about our program, and I'm certainly happy to take questions as we get into that portion of it on anything folks have about it. Wanted to share a little bit about our collegiate consulting review process, and that's the collegiate consulting is a company that we brought in. President Hurley had asked them to come in and provide this operational review of our program, and it was really focused on a couple different things. One, to try and give us a roadmap to improve the experience for our student athletes. That was a key piece of it. But the other piece of it was there's an ongoing question on campus that comes from much of our faculty of what is the right opportunity, what is the right level for our program. Finances at Canisius are always tight. And when they see the expense on the athletic side, there's a conversation about could we do that differently? And President Hurley wanted us to look at that, have an external set of eyes on it, to do that analysis and be able to provide that information to our campus community and to our faculty. And that's a part of what we did. So I'm thankful we've done it. We've done that analysis a couple times here internally. This was an outside set of eyes to look at it. And I think as we walk through some of this, you'll see that some of the same information or many of the same conclusions were arrived at. But nevertheless, there were certainly some recommendations that we're working through now to determine what would be best for us. So the key recommendations, and I know we shared the executive summary with our stakeholders group. Some of you may have received it, but one of the key recommendations is that Division I membership should be preserved. And the key messages that came from that, there were stakeholder groups that were spoken to, broad groups of stakeholders of current students, former students, current student athletes, former student athletes, trustees, many of the different people that we consider our circle of our community were spoken to and interviewed in this process. And that brand association in the marketplace is very, very strong among our alumni. They felt it was important that we continue to maintain that brand awareness. Our association with Canisius, with Niagara University, St. Bonaventure, Siena, Buffalo, places like that is in our marketplace and a little bit broader marketplace when you consider New York State at large, that was going to be strong for us. The revenue opportunities at the Division I level remain far greater than Division II and III, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. The ability to attract the desired academic profile of the students to Canisius was another key piece of this when the analysis of the subdivisional classification came into play. So when we talk about those subdivisions, NCAA has 3 levels, Division I, II, and III. And while there are other organizing bodies or governing bodies nationally for intercollegiate sports, the NCAA is far and away the most recognized one, and certainly the association that people want to have. So within that, there's Division I, where we are, of course, Division II and Division III. And Division II and Division III do have lower expenses, if you will, tend to have a little bit more regional play and things of that nature. So that's where the analysis and the question from our faculty always come: should we be at a different level, and what would be the impact of that? When we look at Division II, what you find is that the revenue limits that come with that are significant. And by revenue, I mean the external revenue that our program generates. And what are those category areas? Well, certainly there's ticket sales, sponsorships, and things of that nature that we generate. But there's also the money that comes from the NCAA that's distributed back to the institutions on an annual basis, that comes from the NCAA basketball tournament, the CBS contract. So that money does flow back to the institutions from the NCAA in the form of distributions. And that amount for us is just generally about $500,000 a year. That is key to us in our revenue numbers that we want to make sure that we have, and are part of our budget to move our program forward. In addition to that, the other revenue that comes in for our program would be game guarantees. You know, for example, we're going to play the University of Miami to start the year, and East Carolina University to start the year in men's basketball. Both of those games will generate substantial game guarantees. Miami will pay us about $75,000, and East Carolina will pay us $60,000 to play those games. So those game guarantees, the basketball guarantees on the men's side, are higher than most other sports. Those game guarantees are a key piece of our funding mechanism, and those are not available to institutions that don't play at the Division I level. Our hockey program played at Penn State a couple of weeks ago, opened the season there. Penn State paid us about $20,000 to go play that game. It was great that we won those. They won the first game of that series. That was a terrific accomplishment by our guys. You don't always do that, but really proud of that one as well. So anyway, those game guarantees are a portion of the revenue, and our generated revenue is about $1.7 million a year when you add it all together. That includes the support from our Blue and Gold Fund, our friends, family, and alumni who donate through the Blue and Gold Fund that is restricted to our athletic program. So those revenue limits would certainly take a hit in game guarantees, ticket sales, and your NCAA revenue sharing. So at the Division II level, we would be probably looking at, they projected, Collegiate Consulting, their analysis looking at it, is that we would reduce expenses by about $800,000 going from Division I to Division II, which is marginal. It's really it's in some of our salaries, not very many of our salaries. So that expense reduction is very, very marginal going to the Division II level. What we would lose is we would lose the vast majority of that $1.75 million of revenue. Therefore, the conclusion is that it's not in our best interest to look at the Division II level to make that change. To make a change to Division III, which is then, many people know, a non-scholarship or no athletic scholarship level within the NCAA, there would be a sizable reduction in our overall expense. That expense would be saved in grant and aids, and it would be saved in our operational and our staffing numbers. But what they also looked at was, they said, if we save that money, those 400 student athletes who we're attracting, grant and aid money, we're going to have to spend a portion of that money to attract those students to Canisius. We're just not going to be able to say, well, they're not going to come to Canisius. We're going to need to replace those 400 students with the new 400 students, and there would be some financial aid cost in that. Our savings on the operational side would be about $1.2 million. But again, when you look at those two things, the savings in financial aid and the loss of revenue from your external sources and the marginal savings overall, that's where the recommendation is that staying at the going to the Division 3 level was not in their recommendation. I think the other key thing with moving to the Division 3 level that became very clear with the consultant's report is that the profile of the students that we would be recruiting at the Division 3 level would be very different than the academic profile of the students that we're recruiting right now. Our coaches, because of our Division 1 level, are able to recruit a very high level student. They receive generous merit packages because of their high school academic performance. And then we're able to add on to that some athletic money to bring those really top students in here. In the Division 3 marketplace, in our admissions marketplace, 17 of our top 20 competitors are Division 3 institutions. And we would then be competing with those institutions for students, and the profile of our students would go down. The other thing, and we'll talk about it a little bit, is our facilities. And Division 3 facilities are a key driver, and our facilities would be insufficient for us to be able to recruit at a top level at the Division 3 level. That is where our scholarship dollars come in and certainly are helpful with us to try and get that higher level student athlete. So some of the key recommendations that came out of the collegiate consulting report, and as I've talked with President Hurley on this, there's really no silver bullet. It's many of the same things we've talked about before. We need to generate new and additional revenue at the college by student recruitment and external revenue sources. How would we be able to do that? They are recommending roster expansion. So to take our 400 students and increase that number to about 440 students, and that would generate an additional $800,000 in revenue to the college. A club sport initiative, a focused effort on trying to build our club sport program, recruit students to club sports, not to that level just below the intercollegiate varsity level, but recruit students to Canisius and provide them a club sport experience, and that would generate about $1.5 million with a really focused club effort. A resident requirement for our students. Right now, all of our students are required to live on campus for their freshman and sophomore years. To make that a resident requirement over the course of 4 years, we have the space in the residence halls, and that would be something that is being studied and being looked at. So all three of those are some of the key initiatives that are focused around revenue generation. And again, as I said, that's the key driver for us, is to try and figure out, as an institution, how can we become a place where we generate more revenue, recruit more students, and be able to have, a broader program overall. The facility recommendations. We have a facility master plan. I'm going to talk about that a little bit here and share a couple slides. A facility master plan that we completed over the course of the last year that ties into the college's master planning process. And it's key for us, right? Certainly, we talked about our facilities, and many of you are aware of our facilities, and how might we best improve those for our recruitment efforts, both at the varsity level, and if we're going to focus on this club initiative, we would need certainly additional field space to be able to do that. So the consulting report does talk about the pursuit of the facilities master plan, in particular outdoor field space, to allow us to grow some of those programs. So I'll share a little bit right now on our facilities master plan. And Mark Evans, who I believe may be on the call, is a very supportive alum of ours, and I had a conversation with Mark about being able to try and do this study to help us move forward, and he was able to help us with this. His support from his annual gift was a key driver in allowing us to be able to have Canon Design come in and do this. So certainly wanted to give Mark a thank you for that, because it helped us move forward. So on this, what we're looking at is a additional field space for our outdoor sport programs. We have 6 teams that are on our one field. And if we're going to grow our club sport program, the focus would be to grow that on in the areas of men's soccer, women's soccer, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, field hockey, baseball, softball to a degree, many of our varsity sports, but just to have that next level club sport opportunity and to provide them a space to do that. So What we're looking at here is an overhead shot of the space behind Lions Hall. That is our largest space on campus that we would be able to do this. That was after considering several different areas on campus, this was the recommendation that came forward. So to take that and put a full-size field back there, it's certainly the space is adequate to do that and allow us to expand our outdoor field space and provide that experience for some students. What we're looking at is certainly a full outdoor field. If we were to put an indoor structure, which would be key for us, it would be a slightly not quite wide enough for a regulation soccer field. You could play every other sport in there, but you certainly could play a full field sport in there if we were to put a structure over that, which for those of you that haven't been in Buffalo for a while, it does get a little chilly in January and February, and that's an opportunity for our programs to train year-round, our club sport athletes, and I believe this would have a tremendous impact on our student recreation, their ability to do some of those things, programming for us to certainly retain students at a higher level. So that's the outdoor field space recommendations at Lions Hall that are a portion of our facilities master plan. And if you look at just a general indoor facility, many programs and communities are working to try and build indoor space. Hockey rinks and indoor facilities are key for any use of recreational space in communities, and we believe that this would be a huge asset to not only our campus but our community at large. When we talk about the Dembski, and there were a few questions that came in, there's two options for us, or two focuses here for the Dembski Sports Complex. This first one would be a phased, and again, I'm not looking for folks to try and understand all the detail, but looking at how can we improve our current space on the Dembski Sports Complex and be able to provide different amenities, if you will, for some of our fans, improve our seating, improve our game management, improve our training, hitting and pitching facility, for our baseball teams, a little bit expanded space there. So that's what this would be focused on, again, with our current footprint and leaving the field generally as it is at this point in time. For those of you, Andrew hit a lot of home runs to straightaway center because that's the shortest place in our ballpark because of that substation that's out there. So the focus would be to try and address that if we could through a partnership with National Grid, But nevertheless, some enhancements here that we feel would really improve our program and the opportunity for our student athletes to train. This would be coupled with the additional field space. That additional field space is critical in terms of just having space to allow more than one team, more than one group to practice at a time. A little broader vision is to take and reorient the field. And if you look at this, the grandstand press box area will be oriented on the west side of our facility at this point in time. And this would allow us to do a number of different things. It could also become a destination and a place for larger outdoor events. Commencement could be outside, commencement could be inside, a number of different options when we look at this. And this is more of a bolder vision of what we might be able to do with that existing space for our athletic facility. When you look at the other side of it, this would be coming at it from the parking lot, a raised seating area with very attractive sight lines, of course, are always attractive and something that gets people excited. Within the Kessler Athletic Center, really focusing, as I might have mentioned, on three different areas: the additional field space, the Dembski Sports Complex, and then the third area certainly is our Kessler Athletic Center, and to try and help us improve that and improve the fan experience when you come into the Kessler. We're using it for far more events. Our graduation is in here at this now, our orientation, there's a number of different campus events that we have. So it's more than just a basketball facility for the campus. And the question is, how can we try and make that a little bit more attractive, a little bit more of an event arena feel, if you will. And so what you're looking at here is that concourse area is the hallway where our Hall of Fame is and all of those offices that run along Main Street. To open that entire area up and make it a concourse for the facility where fans and spectators come in, add another entry point, and put all of our ticketing, merchandising, things of that nature on the outside of the facility to allow us to, as you can see here, create a little bit more seating in a bowl area. This would not expand the roof. This would not expand the seating area significantly, but it would allow us to take it, rather than kind of four corners, fill things in around the side. And this is something that can be done with existing seating options that they have, and certainly the concourse area would be a tremendous addition to what people see and feel when they come in our building. The offices that are currently there would be located beneath in the lower level of the Kessler, so it would be a kind of a reorganization of space. This is just adding some club seats and some club areas, some entertainment areas that are along within some offices, which is simply just a matter of opening up some walls, putting some windows in, and making that a multi-function space for us on that upper level of the building. So this is what you could look at with the Kessler, again, with seating filled in the corners and that function space that would be along one of those walls on the second floor of the KAC. Again, we think it could be, it's appropriate, right? It's appropriate for our conference. We think it would be an enhancement to our facility, and I think it's reasonable in terms of what can we do with a building that was built in the late 60s to try and bring it up to the standards here for us at this point. So that's a focus on the couple of the key recommendations of revenue generation and facility improvements. Other areas that the Collegiate Consulting was saying we should focus on our communication strategies. We did hear loud and clear from many people about coordinating our communication between our advancement office and our athletics office with our alumni to try and become strategic with that, but also make sure that we are understanding what messages are going out and when they're going out. From a fundraising standpoint, to try and be a little bit more focused on things. And I think you've seen over the course of this year and last year, we're currently in the middle of our More Than a Game campaign, and to try and be very focused on a fall campaign and then a giving day. So our philanthropy effort among our programs and our coaches and student athletes is really focused on those two events to drive our annual fund and provide that external support, that operational revenue that's key for our programs. Coordination with enrollment management. We talked about the need to ensure or the need to recruit more students to Canisius and how we can go about doing that. Our population is about 25% of our overall undergraduate class, and that's an important part. So how can we be coordinated with our enrollment management department, but also ensure that we're strategizing and maximizing those other opportunities that may be in recreation and clubs, and that message is clear and consistent. And we've been able to make a number of steps this year from a staffing standpoint and a communication standpoint to enhance that enrollment management conversation. And game attendance and game presentation enhancements, those are things that are ongoing. We always want to try and certainly do that. One of the key things that we've added in the last couple of years has been a pep band. That's been added and is something that was loud and clear the last time we did some of our enhancement conversations. But nevertheless, there's always a need to do this. Within our facility master plan, video boards and presentation opportunities that enhance the game presentation are all part of what we would be looking at within those things, and allow us to do more on our game day atmosphere, because we'd have more tools to use, if you will, to try and do that. So with it, I think I've also shared with our trustees and other folks, when you look at this consulting report, to understanding a situational perspective. We have been challenged financially within our program, and Canisius right now ranks 9 of 11 in the athletic expense area. So we are as I would say, out punching our weight class. Our teams have continued to overachieve because they generally are competing at a much higher level than where we are within the conference in terms of spending among our peer institutions on athletics. We're 10 of 11 in our expense per student athlete. So only Marist, who has a much larger student athlete population program, they have a football program. As a former football player here, certainly that's something that you would have a much larger class, but our physical plant just does not allow for that at this point in time. But that is, the 10 of 11 of our student athletes in overall expense means I think we're being very economical about how we go about our program and good stewards with the resources that we have. 5 of our 16 programs are not ranked in the bottom 2 of their sport and spending. So again, this is just a situational perspective for people to understand it. It came through loud and clear in the consultant's report, but something that we wanted to make sure is I have an opportunity to talk with different groups on campus to share some of that information, because the mindset often is athletics has all the money, and the athletics is where, they've got more money than they know what to do with. And I would say that that's, for those that are informed, it's not an accurate representation. We have to be very, very methodical and very proper on how we go about spending the resources that we do have, because we need to ensure that we're making the most out of them. Where we've had success within that. So the Blue and Gold Fund success is a key thing. It really stood out in that report. Our performance we were second in the MAC in our fundraising, which is just terrific. And much of that comes from the effort of our coaches and our student athletes as they go through these different fundraising campaigns like the one we're in the middle of right now. All that money goes right back to our programs and to our student athletes. Our sponsorship revenue, which is ranked 4th in the MAC, again, a very good piece for us, and something that we continue to try and maximize, because we've got to try and stretch things as far as we can and become creative where we can. And overall, our performance continues to exceed our resource allocation. And I think our coaches are proud of that. I'm very proud of it. And I know in my conversations with President Hurley, that's really what he's looking for from us. He wants us to overachieve. He wants everybody on campus to overachieve. And I believe that we've been able to do that on a fairly consistent basis across all of our programs. So what are our next steps with this? Really having this conversation with this group is a piece of it. The full report's been shared with the Board of Trustees. We've shared it with our internal constituent groups, and working through a number of those different things. But the real key piece of it is, as we go through a strategic planning process on campus, this information is going to help inform our strategic planning process. That strategic planning process is ongoing right now. The framework is being created. And as we're in a presidential transition, that transition to the next president, the next leader of our community, will come in and want to do a strategic plan. So we will be prepared with this information. I believe we're set up properly to have an informed discussion about what we want to become and where our program wants to go with the next leadership of the college. And I think it's been helpful because it reiterates our commitment to where we are. We're in the right place, and how our constituent groups, how our alumni feel about the importance of our program and how we want to try and move it forward. So I'll pause there, take a drink. Thank you. And talk a little bit about the NCAA and try and move this along so we can have some questions. But litigation is driving national change at the NCAA. So the Supreme Court decision, the NCAA versus Alston, and the very public decision that came from the Supreme Court is driving much of the discussion that's happening right now. The name, image, and likeness that happened in July is beginning to take hold right now, and I think will continue to grow. I believe it's an appropriate place for us to be. I think the student athletes should have the opportunity to earn that money. I always have. I believe that Olympic model of them not being paid salaries, but having the opportunity to market themselves is a good thing. And I think we're seeing that, and that the wheels are not going to come off our organization, and it can be managed. The National Labor Relations Board had they just had a very public decision about considering, and they focus this at select sports at a higher level, that they do consider those students employees of an institution. So I think the next thing we're going to see is at that level, and for some schools, a unionization movement among student athletes, and how that trickles down to us, I think will be interesting. For us and for the NCAA, the key focus is what's the value in the membership, and we're looking. There's a constitutional convention that's ongoing right now to see what is the future of the NCAA and what does it look like. Our focus is really kind of threefold: retain the NCAA basketball tournament model if at all possible. Maintain that Division I revenue distribution, and preserve the automatic qualifier access to championships. So when our conference champion wins a soccer championship, that they have an automatic bid into the NCAA championship. That's really important to us. We believe it's a constitutional guarantee in the NCAA, and it's something that we want to try and keep moving forward. I think you're going to see more of these broad national rules, the big bad NCAA, if you will. That's going to decentralize, and many of those rules are going to go out to the conferences because they're facing litigation at a national level, so they're going to segregate that and move that out to the conferences. And as most people know, football is really driving the bus on these decisions. Those A5 institutions, the big conferences, And the football revenue that they have is the key driver in forcing some of this change. So it's something that we're going to see continue to happen nationally, because they know where that revenue is generated, and football is going to be a big decision maker in that. Appreciate that, and wanted to just pause there. And I know Andrew's given me the stop sign to try and start moving on to some questions. So I'll do that, and appreciate everyone's time listening through that information.
Yeah, Bill, thank you. Thank you so much for taking us through that. I know that covered a wide range of topics, and so much were, part of questions that I had coming in. So I appreciate you taking us through that detail, and that, consultative report was really, really helpful. So for the folks on the phone or on the webinar, we're going to jump into a Q&A period. We have a little less than 20 minutes here. We'll start with some questions that were submitted, I guess, prior to the webinar, and then please use the Q&A function down below for any questions that you may have or anything that you'd like to be asked, for Bill, given the fact that, we do only have about 20 minutes. So I'll start with a couple of questions that were pre-submitted, and then we'll go to maybe some of the live questions that come in. But, Bill, I thought that in looking at some of the questions that were submitted, there was a lot of talk around, or a lot of questions around the sort of the status of men's and women's basketball, right? Their status on campus. How do we increase their profile, get more of an engagement from the student population to those sports? Maybe if you even throw hockey in there as well. But what's being done? I know another question that was asked was, are we bringing any, maybe marketable opponents to town to talk about, some of those games in those sports? So maybe talk a little bit about, the culture around campus and ways that maybe we can bolster the profile of the athletics department, and then specifically men's, women's basketball. And again, I think you can throw hockey in there.
Yeah, so that's been it's been an ongoing conversation for really my 17 years here, is how do we work to engage our students, and I think it's been a challenge for us to continue to do that. We've been successful at having our students come out to selected events where we really focus our efforts and our resources toward a couple of different events. The students come out, they have a great time, the team will perform well, but it's getting that consistent support that we get from our students, because they move on to other things. So what is being done? First and foremost, the engagement of our student athletes on campus is important. Our student athletes have heard loud and clear that the general student population, we're asking them to come to our events. They want the other students, they want the student athletes to support some of their events. So we've got to find that, students' time is always important, because you don't want to take too much of it, but our students do understand that they need to support their other students. Our men's basketball program, our women's basketball program, and our hockey guys, and those are the sports that we're really focusing to try and drive student attendance to their events. We've asked them to be more intentional out in our campus community. They've done that, supporting each other at the different athletic events, but also understanding that they need to engage in other clubs and other resources on campus to do that. Our student group, and I think we may have a couple past presidents of our C block, and we've got a young woman from Rochester who's running, the president of our C block group. She's a very creative young woman. Really like to, some of her ideas that she's got on campus. They're looking to try and have some events on campus to bring students together. They're going to have a practice session, if you will, for chants and yells in a couple of weeks here with their cheer and dance team. That's one of the things that they're doing. Speaking to the older crowd, if we serve beer, they will come. That's what some people say. So they are going to have, for groups that are 21 and over, a student event where they're going to serve beer. The students can have beer at the event if they're over 21, and we feel those are reasonable engagement opportunities that we can provide, well supervised, and we think can help us. So long answer to that, engagement of our C block group and our student athletes and our students, to try and get more of them engaged and find some ways that they want to do it, and for our students to be more in the community as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to switch topics a little bit over to name, image, and likeness, right? Something that you touched on briefly towards the end of the presentation. We received a number of questions around this topic, and some that, number one, how has it changed the recruiting process? Are we using it to market ourselves as Canisius in a city like Buffalo to maybe recruit athletes? And then a third question onto that, not to pile on, but do we have any current athletes today engaged in any NIL agreements to date?
Yeah, so yes, we do. We have a number of student athletes who are engaged in those things, but I think it's important to remember that name, image, and likeness has a broad application, right? One of the key things that I was always frustrated about is students who worked camps couldn't say that they were a softball player or a basketball player at Canisius and come to this camp because you can learn from this college athlete. They can do that now. They can market themselves and they can receive perhaps a little bit more money because they're a college student working that camp than just a regular camp counselor. So those are the good things that I would say are low and very appropriate, but they still have to be managed by us. So yes, that is happening. The other area that has become very big is the social media influencers. We have a number of our athletes that are Barstool Sports, athletes. And if you go on their Instagram or their Twitter, they'll identify themselves as a Barstool athlete. They're not getting paid for that. They're getting some free gear. They're getting access to Barstool events. But I think that's just an important designation for many of those kids. So that's really been where our focus has been, and not our focus, but the impact of it here. How can we use this to recruit in a community like Buffalo? I think that's to be determined and will evolve. I do believe that there are some opportunities for our coaching staff members of our institution to put people in touch with other folks who may be looking to try and say, I might be interested in helping a program. We get asked at times, how can I help? Right? And if you're a car dealership, for example, how can I help? Well, if that person wants to support our basketball program or our soccer program or our hockey program, and we tell our coaches, well, here, you can contact these student athletes, and if there's an interest level and they can help your program, then they can be an advertiser or a sponsor for you in some way. They handle that themselves. That's part of this, is they've got to grow up and understand that if they're going to sign a contract, they got to understand what's involved in it. And they've got to claim it on their taxes. They've got to manage it as anybody of us would. But that opportunity to make that connection is there. It used to be one of those things where the NCAA would scare everybody away from that. You can't do it. Well, now we have to begin to figure out how can we make those connections and what can we provide that. And I do think in Buffalo, those opportunities will be there. I tend to think they're going to be at a lower level, and they'll be smaller in nature than what you're seeing at some of the national deals. But if we can take advantage of it, and there's people in our community who want to help support our program, and there's a different way to do that, then now there's a pathway to allow that to happen.
Great. And Bill, we had a couple of questions come in regarding, you talked about in that report where we hover around 400 student athletes over the last 4 years. The potential for the athletic department to grow to as many as 440 student athletes. Have you had any thoughts around, I know there are a couple of questions around adding women's college hockey. We've had a couple of questions come in. Bob McCaffrey, submitted, what other sports are we looking to add in the future? There was some conversation around men's and women's tennis, women's golf. Has there been any sort of discussion around which sports that may be added here in the short term?
There has. Certainly when you're managing in the environment that we have to from a gender equity standpoint, you've got to ensure that you're providing equitable opportunities on both sides. So our focus is, if we're going to add any men's sports, we've got pretty good balance right now. But if we're going to add sports, you can't just add a men's sport. You certainly can add a women's sport. But again, you still have to, the gender equity rules can work both ways. What women's sports, we have not considered hockey at a high level. Niagara University did that, and they felt that was not a good decision for them, and they got out of that effort. Very small population of institutions that play it, and there's a substantial cost involved in it. So hockey is not something that we've been considering on the women's side. Women's sports that we have considered, golf, of course, to mirror our men's golf program. Bowling is something that many schools in our conference are considering. Another sport that we've had some discussion about is acrobatics and tumbling. That's a growing and emerging sport that provides opportunities to a large number of female student athletes at a relatively low cost. Anything that we're doing, we have to consider the impact on campus. Do we have the facility support to be able to pull it off? Or if they're going to be off campus, is that facility opportunity, rental, or whatever its case, is it reasonable in cost in relation to the overall expense of the program?
Yeah, and sticking with that facilities theme for a second, I know we had a number of pre-submitted questions around the college's long-term plan for facilities improvement. And we've had a couple that have come in here, so I'll try to marry the two and reach as many questions, I guess, as I can. But Mark Evans had submitted, have we given any thought to partnering with businesses versus just getting a donor to fund the long-term vision? Western New York has a limited number of Fortune 100 companies. How much money does the school need or the athletics department need to get that type of initiative off the ground and completed?
Yeah. So yes, we have looked at it. Certainly, anytime that there's a fundraising effort for anything that's happening at Science Hall, for any facilities that are happening on campus, the idea of, are there opportunities beyond just the support of our friends, family, and alumni, if you will, is a key piece of it. So are there foundations in town that want to be able to support or might fit for what we're trying to do? The Wilson Foundation is one that everyone thinks about here in Western New York. Their focus on youth sports is a key piece of it. So we have had preliminary conversations with the Wilson Foundation or other groups to say what might be possible. But there always becomes a balance. If they're going to invest a substantial amount of money in it, they're going to want to capture time in there as well. And that would impact our campus community. So how can we do that is an ongoing conversation, but absolutely it has to be involving not only our campus and our folks who will support us, New York State in some ways, if that's possible, and public foundations or outside groups to be able to do it. There have not been very many private sector efforts that are saying, I want to build a facility like this. It becomes a challenge from just a dollars and cents standpoint to make it work. If there's a public-private partnership that we can pull off with this, then we certainly would look at that. But that has not been something that's been presented to us. It's been a little bit more, foundation focused and philanthropically focused.
Yeah, and I think along those same lines, we talk about facilities, and part of that becomes, well, how do we attract the top student athletes that can fit into the Canisius athletic programs? And so we've had a couple of questions come in around, what has been our plan? I know each sport is a little bit unique, but what has been the plan from our coaches from a recruiting standpoint to get into that Rochester area, right? Section 5 high school sports are really, really strong. There was a comment made that, it'd be nice to say, hey, I went to Canisius College without saying, hey, it's in Buffalo, right? To those that are from maybe outside of Western New York. Is there any sort of increased level of effort to go down the Thruway East to bring those from Syracuse, Rochester, Albany, and beyond west to Western New York to maybe grow that footprint of Canisius alumni?
Yeah, that's always what our coaches are looking at. And I think what I find is that much of our recruiting efforts with our coaches are driven by the local club programs. Rochester is very strong in their club lacrosse and club soccer programs. And you've started to see some more of our students coming from the Rochester area. There was a period of time we weren't getting any lacrosse players from Rochester. Now we've got multiple players from the Rochester area. Same with soccer. I think when you look west, there's a lot of students in Pennsylvania and Ohio as well. And many of our students that are coming to campus, our student athletes, are coming from outside of our 1-4 footprint, if you will, zip code footprint, if you will. And that's an important piece of what we try and do. I think it provides a little bit more of some more diversity, if you will, on campus as well. But it's always been a focus of ours. We leave that recruiting effort up to our coaches, where they can have contacts with athletes and with club programs. It's important. But it's easier to get to Rochester. It's an hour drive, Rochester, Syracuse. Our coaches can leave here on campus, can go out and recruit in the afternoon, evening, and be back to campus. Here, Erie, even some areas in Ohio, and our coaches are actively doing that. It becomes a conversation of, can we land them, and where else are those students looking at? But the effort in those areas is absolutely ongoing.
Yeah, and if we go back to the facilities for a second, because I think there was a couple of really good follow-up questions. We've seen schools at the Division III level, like D'Youville, like Medaille, that have leveraged, land outside of the, proper footprint of their campus, being a city school, to be able to build some sort of athletics complex. Has there been any talk of, I know we talked about that space behind Lions Hall, but if we go to an indoor facility that shrinks the size of the field a little bit, has there been any talk about a downtown arena, or other maybe businesses be involved in helping us to source land elsewhere inside of the city or close to campus, but maybe not on campus's footprint, that can allow us to improve our athletic facilities?
Yeah, there have been, Andrew. Again, you mentioned at the beginning, I've been here 17 years, and over the course of that 17 years, I've had multiple conversations with people about ice rinks. Before we were down at the Harbor Center, about indoor facilities and the ability to partner in the construction of indoor facility, use space in an indoor facility. But what always has been a barrier is a private individual having the capital resource to pull those off. They don't exist in our community right now, and it's not because people don't want to. It's not because of ideas. It's because trying to get the economics to work are really hard. So yeah, we continue to have those discussions where people and developers in our community, I've had multiple conversations with them, and we'll continue to entertain them, because if we can find a solution that benefits our program and benefits our community, that's everything Canisius is about. We're trying to impact not only the city of Buffalo and Western New York, but and our students. But if we can do that together, that's tremendous. There's been a number of examples because they're not inexpensive. They cost money.
And only a couple minutes left here. I want to get to two more topics. One being, certainly everybody on this phone knows what we've been dealing with over the last, call it 19 months or so. How did COVID-19 and the pandemic impact? I know you talked a little bit about it in your presentation, but how did it impact the athletics department?
It was a big impact. The college, it impacted everyone on campus. So I don't want to just classify this as an athletic impact. It certainly impacted every unit on campus in a financial way, in a personnel way. It's been a real drain on some of our staff members to work their way through it. And I don't ever want to lose sight of the impact that it had on our students, because they were the ones who had to live their way through it. It's been a tough experience for those students, because if you're a senior student athlete, or if you're a high school senior, you only get one shot at being a senior in high school or senior in college. And if it's been impacted by this pandemic, then that's big. So that's why we worked really hard to try and provide them the best experience we could. It wasn't a full experience, but we did the best we could. And I was really proud of our staff and how we did that. But we have faced significant reductions in some of our budgets that we continue to work our way through. That's why, as we've talked before, we're in the midst of an effort to try and grow some of that more revenue. But we also have come out of it, I think, a little bit better in learning how we can adjust to some things and maybe some changes that have happened in COVID that we can continue forward. We're all sitting here on a Zoom call that if we were to try and arrange this 18 months ago, people would not have been able to do it. It's just become second nature for us to do events like this now. And I think these are the types of things that it's education and the delivery education and how we run our programs. It's all going to be part of it moving forward. But it's been a big impact for us, but that's not to say that it hasn't been a big impact everywhere on campus, and certainly for everyone who else has been on the call.
Sure, and we'll finish with one that maybe hits a little closer to home for you personally. We're getting a question that says, will football ever return to Canisius College?
Well, I'll never say never, but I would say that because of some of the challenges we've talked about from a space standpoint, I don't see that in the short term. Does it provide you an opportunity to generate revenue? It does, because the students will be paying tuition to come to Canisius. But it's also where do we house and how do we take care of 100 additional students on our campus? Right now, our physical plant and our focus of our facilities master plan is not trying to figure out how we can essentially add 25% more to our student population in one swoop. We don't have the physical plant to do that right now. And that's why, after a lot of discussion, the decision was made to to discontinue the football program. So I say that with a little pang of remorse, because as a football player, I know my experience here was great, and I know the guys that I played with really enjoyed that experience. But what I'm focusing on is ensuring that other students in other sports have the same experience and have those same friendships that last for years. I know you probably have baseball players and friends that you've had from your time at Canisius that continue to today, and I think that's a key piece in what's wonderful about our program.
No doubt, no doubt. A number of those have become my closest friends. So you're spot on there. Well, Bill, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to sit in this chair today and spend some time with you. I hope everyone on the phone, found this to be informative and beneficial and a good use of your lunch period. So, Aaron, with that, I will send it back to you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Bill, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm looking forward to working with you and getting some alumni pre-game events off the ground this year. And I'd like to acknowledge Andrew. You did a fantastic job hosting, moderating. Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone that joined us today, and have a lovely afternoon, and go Griffs. And have a lovely afternoon, and go Griffs.
Thank you.